I used to be the perfect daughter, everything my parents ever dreamed of. I had the right job, the right friends, the right image. But when I made the decision to marry Jake, a man who had nothing in terms of money or status, everything changed. My parents didn't just disagree, they cut me out of their lives completely. It was like a switch had been flipped. And you know what? The most shocking moment came when I was at my wedding reception, glancing at the empty seats where my family should have been. No phone calls, no flowers, not even a text. Just silence. That moment changed everything. I went from being the family's golden child to being a complete stranger, and that was just the beginning. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here, and hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name is Olivia, and I was 28 when everything in my life turned upside down. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood outside of Chicago, in a home where success wasn't just expected, it was demanded. My dad, Robert, was a corporate executive who worked long hours to climb the ladder, and my mom, Karen, was a socialite who spent her days hosting charity events and mingling with the city's elite. Then there was my older brother, Luke, who had always been the heir apparent. Everything about our family screamed perfection, and I was supposed to follow the same path. I was supposed to get a prestigious degree, land a high-paying job, marry someone successful, and fit seamlessly into their world. But I didn't exactly fit the mold. I wasn't like Luke, who had his life together since the age of 22. I was the dreamer, the one who saw the world a little differently. I studied design in college, not finance or law. I didn't want a career where I could climb the ladder in a suit and tie. I wanted a job that allowed me to express creativity, to build something unique, to make a mark in a way that mattered to me. I often felt like I was living in the shadow of my family's expectations, struggling to be something I wasn't. But then I met Jake. Jake was everything my parents hated. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't have a prestigious job or a title. He worked as a freelance photographer, living from one project to the next, just getting by. But with him, I felt free. I felt like I could finally be myself. He didn't judge me for wanting a different life. With Jake, I found someone who understood my dreams. I had never felt more alive, more sure of my place in the world. But as much as I loved him, I knew this relationship wasn't going to sit well with my family, and that in itself was a terrifying thought. It wasn't until Jake proposed that I truly realized how much my life was about to change. I still remember that evening like it was yesterday. We were sitting on the porch of our little apartment, watching the sunset over the city skyline, when he pulled out a ring. It wasn't flashy, and it definitely wasn't what anyone would expect from a man with a modest income. But it was perfect, because it came from him. He asked me to marry him, and without hesitation I said yes. In that moment, everything felt right. I was ready to build a life with Jake, even if it meant stepping away from everything I knew. The problem was, I knew that decision would break my family's heart, or at least that's how they'd see it. I could already hear the words in my head, "You're throwing away your future, he's a nobody, you could do so much better." I had heard it all before in subtle ways from my parents. They had always had their own ideas about who I should be with, and Jake didn't fit that mold. He didn't have a pedigree, he didn't have the connections, and he didn't come from money. The very things my parents valued so much were the things Jake didn't have. But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was that he made me feel seen, loved, and for the first time like I was enough. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had, sitting down with my parents and telling them about the engagement. My mom's face fell, and my dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Their disappointment was palpable, but the real shock came when they said the words that would change my life forever. "If you marry him, don't expect us to be a part of your life anymore." They weren't kidding. The following weeks were filled with tension, but I stuck to my decision. Jake and I went ahead with the wedding, and despite my parents' absence, we said our vows. And that was the moment when I truly understood what I had lost. But little did I know that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. The wedding day was a blur, filled with excitement, nerves, and a strange sense of emptiness. I kept waiting for a call or a text from my parents, hoping they'd come around. Maybe they'd show up, maybe they'd make some kind of gesture to let me know they still cared. But as the ceremony ended and the reception unfolded, that hope slowly turned into a harsh reality. My phone never buzzed, not a word from them. I remember standing in the middle of the reception hall, holding my champagne glass, watching everyone else celebrate. The laughter, the music, the speeches, it was all so surreal. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, and that something was my family. There were empty seats at the head table, seats that should have been filled by my parents and brother. It wasn't just a metaphorical absence, it was physical. They weren't there. They had chosen to stay away to prove a point, to let me know that I wasn't welcome in their world anymore. Jake, of course, was beside me, trying to keep the mood light. "Hey, they're lost, but we've got each other. Let's just focus on what's in front of us," he said, trying to reassure me, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Even though he was with me, even though we had each other, the hurt was still there. The absence of my family wasn't something you could easily brush off. It felt like a gaping hole in the middle of my chest, one that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't until later that night, after the last guests had left and Jake and I were sitting alone in our little apartment, that the weight of it all truly hit me. I was angry, so angry. Not at Jake, but at my parents, at everything they stood for. How could they do this? How could they disown me over something as simple as love? I had always followed their rules, their expectations. I had tried to be the perfect daughter. But in that moment, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, I could never be enough for them. They didn't care about my happiness, only about their image. The next day, my phone rang. It was my dad. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "I hope you know what you've done," he said, each word measured, deliberate. "You've made your choice, Olivia, and that choice means you're no longer a part of this family." There was no yelling, no emotional outburst, just cold, final words. It felt like a slap across the face, a rejection that left me speechless. "Dad, please, we can talk about this. I love him. He makes me happy," I pleaded, but there was no changing his mind. My mom didn't even pick up the phone. I tried again and again, but it was clear that my relationship with them had ended before it had even really begun. The next few months were a blur of emotions. I was heartbroken, devastated by the loss of my family, but something inside me also sparked. A determination, a fire to prove that I wasn't just some foolish girl making a mistake. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. I didn't need them to be happy. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to do this for myself, for the life I wanted to build with Jake. So we dusted ourselves off, and with no help from anyone, we started from scratch. And while the pain of losing my family never fully went away, something strange began to happen. I started to feel free. It was as if the chains that had bound me to my parents' expectations had been broken. And for the first time in my life, I was making decisions for me, not for anyone else. I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to build something of my own. And that was just the beginning. The first few months after Jake and I got married were a roller coaster, to say the least. On one hand, we were living a life that felt completely authentic to who we were. On the other hand, the reality of our situation was harsh, harder than I had ever imagined. Sure, we had each other, and sure, we had dreams, but dreams don't pay rent. They don't fill the fridge or put gas in the car. In the early days, we were scraping by, barely making ends meet. I had always been the kind of person who liked to have things figured out. I had the plan, the path laid out in front of me: get the degree, get the job, marry the right person. But now, none of those things seemed to matter anymore. What mattered was how we were going to keep our heads above water. I tried picking up freelance design jobs, but the pay was inconsistent, and there were days when I'd spend hours working on a project only to get paid a pittance. Jake's photography gigs helped a little, but they were few and far between. There were weeks when we didn't know if we could afford to buy groceries, let alone make rent. And it wasn't just the financial stress that wore us down. It was the constant feeling of being judged. People from our old circles, people who had once smiled at us at parties, congratulated us on our achievements, now acted like we didn't exist. Our friends had largely faded into the background. Some, like Jake's college buddies, remained supportive, but others pulled away. I remember running into an old acquaintance from college at a coffee shop, someone I had once considered a close friend. She barely recognized me at first, and when she did, her smile seemed forced. "Olivia, wow, it's been so long," she said, her tone flat, almost apologetic. She asked how I was doing, and when I mentioned the business Jake and I were starting, her eyebrows shot up. "Oh well, good for you. I hope it works out," she said, her voice laced with skepticism. I could see it in her eyes, the doubt, the judgment. To everyone else, we were just two people who had made a foolish decision to marry without any kind of financial security. We were the joke, the couple everyone talked about behind closed doors. People didn't take us seriously, and that stung. It stung even more because in some ways I knew they were right. We were living paycheck to paycheck. We were struggling to find our footing in a world that demanded instant success and guaranteed results. The tension between Jake and I was starting to build too. It wasn't that we didn't love each other, we did. But the pressure of trying to make ends meet, combined with the emotional toll of having lost everything that once felt stable, was starting to take its toll on us. I found myself snapping at him more often than I wanted to. Little things that wouldn't have bothered me before suddenly felt like huge issues. One night, I found myself arguing with Jake over something as small as the fact that he forgot to buy coffee beans on his way home from a shoot. It wasn't about the coffee, of course. It was about the stress, the constant anxiety of our situation. And he was feeling it too. He would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, his eyes wide with panic, wondering how we were going to make it through another month. We were both trying so hard, and yet it felt like we were getting nowhere. But through all of this, there was something Jake never lost, his optimism. He would remind me almost daily that this was temporary, that the hard times would pass. "We've got this, Liv," he'd say, wrapping his arms around me. "We just have to keep going, we're in this together." It wasn't always easy to believe him. It wasn't always easy to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But something about Jake's belief in us, in me, kept me going. I started to pour everything I had into our business idea, our big dream. I began researching products we could sell online, ways to market ourselves that didn't require a huge budget. I found a small niche in the design world, creating custom, personalized items that appealed to people looking for unique gifts. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jake started booking more photography jobs, slowly but surely. We were putting everything into our work, every ounce of energy we had left, but the doubt still lingered. The outside world still didn't believe in us. And deep down, I was afraid they were right. I was afraid we were just two naive dreamers who were bound to crash and burn. I had started to question myself, to wonder if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe if I had just listened to my parents, maybe if I had just married someone they approved of, someone who could offer me financial security, I wouldn't be in this mess. But Jake never wavered. Even on the days when I was ready to give up, he would remind me why we were doing this. "It's not about the money, Liv," he would say. "It's about building something real, something we can be proud of. Something that's ours." And slowly, painfully slowly, I began to believe him. But there were still days when the weight of our struggles felt too much to bear. We were drowning in bills, in uncertainty, in the judgment of others. And yet, somehow, we kept going. It was like we had no other choice. The world may have seen us as nothing, but we had each other, and that, for now, was enough. It felt like we were stuck in a never-ending loop. The more we worked, the more we seemed to struggle. Bills piled up, projects stalled, and there were days when I thought maybe I was just kidding myself. I had always prided myself on being resilient, but there were moments when I felt like I was teetering on the edge of giving up. And that's when everything changed. It happened on a quiet night. Jake had just come home from a photo shoot, exhausted. He was always the one who tried to keep things positive, but even his upbeat attitude had been tested. I could tell he was worn out just as I was. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating takeout because cooking felt like too much work, when I had a thought that startled me. What if we were going about this all wrong? For weeks we'd been trying to find success in the most conventional ways. I was still pushing design work, Jake was doing his photography jobs, but the gap between what we were making and what we needed kept growing. The tension between us had been building, not because of anything personal, but because the stress was overwhelming. It felt like we were living paycheck to paycheck, hoping for a break that seemed so far away. And then it hit me. I'd been trying so hard to sell products I thought people should want, but what if I started selling something that had meaning? What if, instead of just selling another design, we created something that people could connect with, something personal, something people would be willing to invest in emotionally? I could feel the excitement building as I started brainstorming. I grabbed my laptop and began researching custom, personalized products, art prints, hand-lettered quotes, things that would speak to people's hearts. I knew this wasn't just about making money, it was about creating something people could hold on to, something they'd want to keep forever. I stayed up all night thinking about the possibilities. The next morning, when Jake woke up, I was practically buzzing with ideas. I was already drafting designs in my head, making lists of things to create. I couldn't wait to tell him. "Jake," I said, practically bursting with energy. "I've got it, I know what we need to do." Jake looked up, still groggy from lack of sleep but curious. What's that? I explained the whole idea, the shift from generic design work to personalized gifts. Items that could tell stories, that could be customized to celebrate life's special moments. At first, I think Jake wasn't quite sure what to make of it, but he could see how passionate I was. We decided to give it a shot. The next couple of days were a blur. We spent hours working on new designs, brainstorming products that could cater to milestones, engagements, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, things people would want to gift to their loved ones. We reworked our website to reflect this new direction, with a fresh, more personal brand identity. Jake worked on improving his photography to showcase the products in a way that felt authentic. We were exhausted, but we were also excited for the first time in months. It wasn't just a shift in our business, it was a shift in our mindset. Then came the hard part, launching. We didn't have much of a marketing budget. So we turned to social media, where we'd already gained a modest following. I put together a few posts showcasing our new products, highlighting their personal touch, and shared them with our audience. We asked people to share their stories, their moments, anything that would connect them to what we were offering. The first few sales trickled in. It wasn't a flood, but it was something. For the first time in ages, we felt like we were heading in the right direction. The positive feedback from customers was overwhelming. They loved the personal touch. They loved the idea of receiving something unique, something made just for them. It felt like we were finally creating something that mattered, not just to us but to others as well. And then, things started to gain momentum. One morning, I woke up to a message from a customer who had purchased one of our custom prints. She told me that it was a gift for her best friend's wedding, and that the bride had been moved to tears when she opened it. The message was simple, but it hit me harder than I expected. "Thank you for helping me make this moment unforgettable." That's when I realized we had done it. It wasn't about just selling things, it was about creating connections, building relationships, and bringing joy to people's lives. I could finally see the potential in what we were doing, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were building something real. But even though things were looking up, it wasn't without its challenges. We had a long way to go before we could truly say we had made it. But this moment, the first glimpse of success, was all we needed to keep going, and just like that, everything started to change. The orders began to increase, our social media following grew, and people started sharing their experiences with our products. What had once felt like a hopeless dream now felt like a legitimate business, and I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were building something, and it felt damn good. Just when we thought we were gaining traction, the weight of our success started to crush us. The orders were flooding in, and the excitement of the earlier days quickly turned into panic. We had underestimated the demand. It wasn't just a trickle of orders, it was a full-on rush, and we couldn't keep up. I still remember that day so clearly. Jake had just returned from a photo shoot, exhausted as usual, and I was at the kitchen table, sorting through a mountain of emails and orders. We had been working non-stop for weeks, barely sleeping, and yet it still didn't feel like enough. Our website had exploded with traffic, and customers were raving about our products, but the reality was we were falling behind. "Olivia, we can't keep doing this," Jake said, staring at the overflowing inbox. "We don't have the capacity for this kind of growth." And he was right, we didn't. The backlog of orders grew longer, and shipping delays started to pile up. Customers began complaining, some were upset about the delays, others about the quality of the packaging. Each email felt like another weight added to my shoulders. We were both overwhelmed. Late nights became the norm, as we scrambled to get everything out on time. Jake handled photography while I did the design work, but it was becoming clear that we were too small a team to handle this level of growth. Every time we thought we had everything under control, another crisis hit. It wasn't just the operational stress. We were also struggling to make ends meet. As the orders piled up, so did our expenses. We had to purchase more supplies, pay for shipping, and invest in tools to streamline our process. The problem was, we were barely scraping by. We had maxed out our credit cards to get this far, and now, the costs were multiplying faster than we could handle. I tried to stay optimistic. "We can do this, Jake," I told him one night, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. "We just need to keep going." But Jake's face said it all. He was exhausted, and the doubt was creeping in. We didn't have the resources to hire extra help, and with each new order, the pressure mounted. It felt like we were running out of time. Then came the blow that almost broke us. One of our suppliers raised their prices significantly. The cost of the materials we used to create our products doubled, and we had no way to absorb the increase. I couldn't believe it. Just when we thought we were on the edge of success, we were handed another obstacle. That was the moment I broke. "We can't keep doing this," I said, breaking down in front of Jake. "Maybe we were never meant to make it. Maybe this was all just a dream." But Jake, ever the optimist, didn't let me quit. "We're not giving up," he said, his voice firm but tired. "We've come this far, we'll figure it out." So we did. We started cutting costs wherever we could, finding new suppliers, reworking our pricing strategy, and optimizing our shipping processes. We worked through the night, coming up with solutions, cutting back on unnecessary expenses. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Things didn't magically get better overnight, but slowly we regained control. We learned to manage the growth, and while we still faced challenges, we no longer felt like we were drowning. The orders kept coming, and we were finally ready to handle them. It wasn't about perfection, it was about resilience, and for the first time in a long while, I could see that we were going to make it. Just when we thought things were settling down, life hit us with another twist. Our business was starting to gain real momentum. Orders were coming in, and for the first time in months, we were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But that was when I received an email that completely changed everything. It wasn't from a customer, it wasn't from a supplier, it was from my father. I stared at the email in disbelief, my heart racing. He hadn't spoken to me in over a year, not since he disowned me for marrying Jake. He had written me off completely, told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. Now, out of the blue, he was reaching out to me. I opened the email cautiously, unsure of what to expect. The message was short and blunt. He didn't apologize or try to make amends. Instead, he told me that he had been watching my progress and was impressed with what I had built. He offered me a position in his company, something high up, with a generous salary and promises of growth. I sat there, frozen, unable to process what I was reading. My father, who had once cut me off, was now offering me a job. He didn't mention anything about family or the past, just that he saw value in my skills and wanted to bring me into the fold. Jake was the first person I told. "I don't know what to make of it," I said, showing him the email. "He's offering me a position, but it feels like a trap." Jake read through the message and looked up at me. "Liv, why would you even consider it? After everything he's put you through, after everything he said." "I don't know. Part of me wants to show him that I can succeed without him. But another part of me feels like this is my chance to finally prove to him that I made the right choice," I admitted, feeling conflicted. Jake took my hand, his expression serious. "You've already proved that. You've built something incredible on your own. Don't let him take that away from you. This is about your success, not his approval." I knew he was right. Deep down, I knew I didn't need my father's approval anymore. But something in me still longed for the validation I had spent my whole life trying to earn. Could I walk away from this opportunity? It was tempting, especially since it was an offer that could secure a comfortable future for both me and Jake. But I also knew it would mean sacrificing everything we had worked for. A few days later, I received another email from my father. This time it was less formal, more of a plea. He wanted me to work with him, to join his company and put aside the past. He even suggested we merge my business with his, offering me a position that would give me power and resources I never dreamed of. But there was something off about the tone. He wasn't interested in me or my work, he was interested in what I had built. It felt like a business deal wrapped in family terms. I could feel the anger rising. It wasn't just that he wanted me to come back, it was the way he was trying to take credit for my success. He was offering me a role, but on his terms. It was as if he saw my business as just another project to be absorbed into his empire. I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about family, it was about control. My father had never cared about me or my happiness, he only cared about my success because it could benefit him. I had spent my entire life trying to earn his love and approval, and now I saw it clearly. He only wanted me because I had built something valuable. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let him take what was mine. I didn't need his offer to prove that I could succeed. I had already done that, and I had done it without him. I sent him a response, thanking him for the offer but politely declining. I told him that my business was my own, and I wasn't interested in merging it with his. This was my success, built on my terms, and I wasn't about to let him rewrite my story. The moment I hit send, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt free. For the first time, I realized that my success wasn't tied to anyone's approval but my own. I had created something from nothing, and that was worth more than any job offer or family approval. I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all my father, take that away from me. The days following my decision to decline my father's offer felt like an emotional tug-of-war. On the surface, things were going well. The business was growing, and Jake and I were getting by, just as we had hoped. But beneath the surface, a crisis was brewing that I wasn't prepared for. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up some orders, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and my heart dropped. It was a message from my mother. After months of silence, she had reached out. The message was short, but the words were enough to stop me in my tracks. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, unsure of what to do. I had spent so many years chasing their approval, desperately trying to live up to their expectations. But now, after everything I had built, I didn't know if I could go back. I had finally found a sense of self-worth, and I was afraid that reconnecting with them would undo all of that progress. Jake saw the look on my face and gave me a knowing glance. "You don't have to respond, Liv. You've already made your choice. We've built something real, and that's what matters." His words made sense, but a part of me still longed for the family I had always wanted, even if it meant going back to the pain. My mind was torn between wanting to heal the rift and protecting what I had now. The crisis wasn't just about my family, it was about me finding peace with the decision I had already made. In the end, I knew I couldn't return to that life. I had to protect the life Jake and I had worked so hard to create. I turned the phone over and let the message sit unanswered. The past was just that, the past. What mattered was the present and the future I was building on my terms. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain: I was enough as I was, and that was all I needed to heal. After the message from my mother, things seemed to slow down in my mind. The world around me kept moving, orders kept coming, our business continued to grow. But I was caught in this space between the past and the future, trying to figure out how to move forward. But then, one night, something shifted. Jake and I were sitting on the couch, catching up after a long day, when I realized I had spent so much time looking backward. My focus had always been on what I was leaving behind: my family, their approval, their rejection. I had given so much of my energy to trying to mend something that wasn't mine to fix. But here I was, building something with Jake, something real, something we had created together. I couldn't let myself be consumed by the weight of what I had lost. "We've come so far, haven't we?" I said to Jake, my voice full of emotion. Jake smiled, his eyes warm. "We have. And we're just getting started." It was in that moment that I realized the truth. The choice I had made to walk away from the family who didn't accept me, to build a life with someone who believed in me, was the right one. I wasn't missing out on anything, I was gaining everything. I thought back to the offer from my father. It had tempted me, yes. The security, the promise of recognition, the chance to step into a world I once thought was unattainable. But I had to ask myself, what was that worth if it meant losing myself in the process? I had already spent years trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. And now, for the first time in my life, I was building something that reflected who I was. It was hard work, it was full of struggle, but it was mine, and I didn't need anything else. So I made peace with my decision. I didn't need to reach out to my family for closure. I didn't need to wait for them to apologize or come around. I had already found my peace. I had already built a life that was worth more than any validation they could offer. Looking at Jake, I knew without a doubt that this was where I belonged. This was where I had always belonged. Together, we had created something that was ours, untouched by anyone else's expectations. "I'm proud of us," I said, finally feeling the weight lift from my chest. "We've really done something here." "We have," Jake agreed, his smile as wide as ever. "And the best part, we're just getting started." In that moment, I realized that this was what success truly looked like. Not the kind that comes with titles, approval, or recognition, but the kind that comes from living life on your own terms. The kind that is built on love, hard work, and the belief that you can create something amazing, even when the world says you can't. And that was the moment I knew for sure I had made the right choice. It wasn't just the business that had changed, it was me. I had walked away from everything I thought I needed and built a life with Jake that was far beyond what I could have imagined. I no longer felt the need to seek approval from anyone. For the first time in my life, I was finally living on my own terms. The phone never rang with another message from my parents, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. But I had come to terms with that. I didn't need them to be a part of my life to validate my choices. My happiness wasn't dependent on their acceptance, it was about what I had built, what Jake and I had built together. Looking at our thriving business, the laughter in our home, and the joy in our hearts, I realized how far we'd come. We had our struggles, sure. But in the end, those struggles were the ones that defined us, not the ones that tore us down, but the ones that helped us grow. And as I stood there, watching Jake sketch out new designs for our next project, I knew that the best was yet to come. This journey hadn't been easy, but it had been ours, and that was everything. No more doubts, no more fears about what others thought. It was just us, living a life we were proud of, and that in the end was all I ever needed.